Welcome to the Speak with People podcast, where we believe that healthy communication is the key to unlocking your leadership potential. We are the go-to resource for leaders looking to greatly improve their communication skills, whether it's one-on-one interactions, team settings, public speaking, or digital communication. By improving these skills, leaders can create stronger connections and drive positive change within their organizations. Each and every episode, we sit down with experts from various fields from around the world, just like you're grabbing a coffee with them, to dive into real, practical conversations. Our goal is to help you transform your communication skills so you can lead more effectively, build stronger relationships, and make a lasting impact. So go grab your favorite drink, settle in, and let's learn together. Well, how do you build a personal brand that actually connects with real people, not just algorithms? And how do you become the type of leader that people remember and not just the kind that they scroll past? Probably we're all in this boat. And how can you grow your influence without watering down your voice? Well, welcome back to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. We believe healthy communication is the heartbeat of impactful leadership. And I can't wait to dive into today's episode. We're going to talk about a masterclass in being able to do these type of things. I'm joined by a brand strategist, a storytelling expert, and he's got so much to share, especially for our guests who you've been hesitant about starting a podcast, or you want to be a podcast guest and you want to get your voice out there and find your own unique voice. And so we're going to learn so much about our voice, about storytelling, being a podcast guest, our own brand. And so, Seth, I'm so excited to have you. And you're going to share more of your story, but thank you for being on the Speak with People podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, honored to be here, and very excited to be here.
Well, and we just, before we hit record, talked about our love for baseball and
That's right. Red Sox.
I love it. I love it. I would absolutely love to get to San Francisco sometime, though, to go to Oracle Park, because it just looks
It
beautiful.
it's beautiful. I go. I'm not a Giants fan, since I'm a Red Sox fan, but luckily with the changes in baseball lately, right, the Sox have been out here pretty frequently to play. Just about every other year they're out here because it's two great franchises. So why wouldn't MLB want to get that kind of TV money, right? So I go, and sometimes I just go see the Giants if some other great team is in town. Particularly, my daughter's starting to get interested in baseball, and she likes that her grandfather supports the Giants, so we go on down there. It's fun.
I love it. I turned 50 this year, and on my bucket list was I've never been to a game at Fenway, and so I'm going to try to
Oh,
get to Fenway.
yeah. Well, when you want to, I still have a lot of connections up there and know some people in the organization. So when you decide you want to go up there, let me know. I can maybe try to hook you up with some little special seats or something.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, before we hop into the conversation, tell us a little bit more about you, your journey, what's kind of got you to this place.
Sure. I've been telling stories in my whole life, really. I won my first storytelling contest when I was 12. And, everything that I've done from being a bartender at my family's restaurants and bars when I was in, the end of high school into college, learning how to talk to people and tell stories. And, I mean, if you're in a nightclub, you're just slinging drinks. But if you're behind a bar, a lot of that is interacting with people, relating with people, getting to know people, telling stories. And that just carried with me. I mean, I studied creative writing in college. I got out of college and got out of college after almost failing out twice. Started a successful newspaper that became the largest weekly newspaper in Boston. And when my partners and I sold that business to a regional publishing company, my primary beat was politics, and so I took a job with a you know fairly high level politician in Massachusetts, and went to work for him first as a communications director, and then his chief of staff. And that, from there, that kind of launched my career into working in politics and government. And when I eventually left that and went out into the public sector, I started doing marketing work for some national brands and other government agencies and whatnot. And so I've just, my my interest in people and my interest in stories and my desire to tell those stories, when I hear something that interests me, all I want to do is tell somebody about it. And that's kind of,
Wow.
been the truth since I was the wee lad of 12 winning my first storytelling contest.
Boy, I love that. I love that. I can't even imagine, uh, being a communications director in politics. I mean, it seems like you could communicate something, and seven different places say that that's wrong, and like it's just a wild world.
Yeah, well, you think about the lesson that I learned around that, and I think this is an important lesson in business as well as politics. It pertains equally, is that ultimately we have to get comfortable with the idea that strong messages attract a certain part of our audience, or not our audience. A strong message attracts a certain group, and that's our audience, and it repels a different group, and that's not our audience, right? And early on it can feel uncomfortable with the idea that you're turning people off. You're not intentionally doing it to be a jerk or be divisive or whatever, but if you try to make your message appeal to everybody, your message will be totally unappealing, because it has nothing appealing about it.
Wow.
Anything, if I say that I love chocolate ice cream, people that prefer vanilla ice cream are not going to respond well to that message. But if I try to say, well, my favorite ice cream is take a scoop of chocolate and a scoop of vanilla and blend it all together into some mush, and then that's the best ice cream, you're going to have everybody saying, no, it's not. That's Now nobody likes my message, right? So, this is a lesson that, like many things in life, I think, we learn some lessons early in life and then we forget them. And then later in life, we come back to it. But, you and I are roughly of an age. I was growing up in Massachusetts in the late 70s, early 80s, graduated grade school in 84. And my best friend and I were absolutely obsessed uh, with truckers, with big rigs. You had all the movies coming out at that time: Convoy, Truckers, Smokey and the Bandit, Any Which Way But Loose, right? And so Keith and I would, any chance we would jump on our bikes and pedal down to the local rural route, and we would stand there on the side of the highway, this little rural route, and pump our fists as the truckers would go by to
Yep.
get them to blow their air horns, right? So Keith would be there in his John. He always wore a John Deere trucker cap, and I would often be wearing my uncle's old Vietnam era Army helmet that was, so big you could barely see my eyes from under the rim of it. Just two dumb, cute kids by the side of the road, pumping their fists. And if you think about it, though, there was plenty of trucks on that rural route, but there were way more cars, way more vans, way more pickup trucks, way more. It was the 70s, early 80s, way more station wagons with their beautiful wood paneling or whatever, right? And you know, if we were when we were out there, we didn't worry about the cars and the vans and the trucks and everything else. We worried about the rigs that were coming down the road. We pumped our fists. When a van came by, we didn't start, making this motion because we wanted the vans to honk their horns for us. We didn't care about the vans honking their horns. We cared about the rigs because they had the air horns. And I think about that, kid now, and that understanding that we didn't we didn't get shy around, oh no, what if the lady in the station wagon sees us pumping our fists? We just did what we needed to do to communicate to the truckers that we wanted to hear air horns. And in a business, as you're building your brand, as you're looking to connect with your audience, as you're looking to be authentic, as you're looking to be relatable, you need to understand that your message is not for everybody. By design, you're looking to speak to a very specific segment of the population at large. That specific segment is somebody that is interested in your services or your product and is in the market for your services and your product right now or in the very near future. And the rest of the people, you don't need to really be worried about what they think about your message or not. You need to remember that little kid, remember me as a little kid, and remember yourself. You probably did a similar thing. Remember yourself as a little kid, and you remember that, like, look, you pump your fist for the truckers, and you don't worry about the station wagons because the station wagons don't have air horns, and you're there for the air horn, right?
Boy, I love that. I mean, it's so hard. So many business leaders, so many, I mean, speakers, I mean, entrepreneurs, they want to make sure their whatever it is reaches everyone, and it's like myself included, we fight the kind of niche down to, finding our specific, and it's such a great encouragement that we actually will reach more people the more we're focused on who exactly we're going to reach. Like it's just crazy how it works.
Yeah. Again, so many people have a problem with it, and it's not a problem like, oh, I have a problem, I'm going to beat myself up over it, but it's a thing that people struggle with, particularly entrepreneurs. I mean, entrepreneurs tend to be this is not universally true, but entrepreneurs tend to be very creative people. They have lots of ideas. Oh, I could do this and I could help people this way. I've got this business. This is my core business. But what if I did this other thing? And what if I did this other thing? Now I'm going to launch a second business, right? So we have all of these great ideas. And when somebody comes along, whether it's a marketing coach, some other kind of business coach, salesperson, whatever, and they say, look, you need to niche down. You need to narrow your focus. You need to stop trying to worry about, oh, I could do this and I could do that. People rebel against it because they say, well, look, I'm a life coach. I can help people with their finances. I can help people with their marriage. I can help people with their relationship with their kids. I can help people with, it's like, yeah, you can. But, if advertising is different in these days where we're primarily marketing and advertising ourselves online. But I think it helps to think back to the way that advertising used to be. Like, you need to find a certain group of people that are going to get excited about you. And if you can help people on a broad, like, you're not going to run an ad in a business magazine and talk about marriage counseling and helping with raising kids and stuff like that, because that's not what the people are there reading the business magazine for. And so, if you're talking about, if your LinkedIn posts are one day talking about one thing and the next day is talking about another thing and the third day you're talking about a third thing, people have no idea
Wow.
what you're really all about or why you are the person to help them. Because frankly, if I wanted somebody to help me with marital problems, I would want to come to somebody who does nothing but help people with marital problems. I want a
Right.
specialist, right? If I have a heart problem, I want to go to a heart specialist. If I got a marriage problem, I want to go to a marriage specialist. Finance problems, a finance specialist. And if you are out there marketing yourself as a generalist because you can help people with all these things, and I believe that you truly can, but from a marketing point of view, from a brand building point of view, you're doing yourself no service to to honestly talk about all the things that you can help people with.
Wow.
It's just,
Wow.
that's just truth. It's a hard truth, but it's truth.
Absolutely. And we as leaders, we need to hear that because yeah, we do kind of get wrapped up into, so much of that. So what would speak to us as, leaders, uh, when we do want to try to get, communicate over here and communicate to them and communicate over here, how do we stay true to our individual voice? Like, why is it so critical to stay true? Because your example right there of, LinkedIn is so powerful. If every single day we're all over the place, but how maybe some parameters for us to kind of, remind us to kind of stick to that voice that we have.
Well, I think that there is a happy medium to be reached. If I can, I'm going to, I'll get to the how do we stick to it. But part of the way how that we get to it, I think, is getting comfortable with being authentic,
Mm.
relatable in our messaging. And that means, maybe loosening up a little bit, not being quite so starched, button up, suit and tie business all the time. I mean, here you are in your polo shirt. I'm wearing a, baseball windbreaker. We're talking business, but we talked baseball a little bit earlier. I told a funny story about my childhood. Lately on LinkedIn, I put up at least one business focused, hey, if you need some help around being an effective podcast guest, if you need some help, kind of getting clarity with your brand or something, I'm going to write about that every day. And then because that's what everybody on LinkedIn is writing about,
Right.
and the people that are on LinkedIn, it's like, you get tired of just, I'm not pitching, like join my program. But as people are scrolling through LinkedIn, they also want to have a little fun in their day. They're probably scrolling LinkedIn because they're taking a break in between meetings or something like that. And so increasingly, if you're on LinkedIn a lot lately, you've been noticing that it's been kind of getting a lot looser, a lot more fun. People have been just posting some funny things. So, I've been posting stuff about, um, you know, I've been using the the latest Dune movies to like take quotes from the Dune movies and change them slightly so that they relate to podcasting and brand building and stuff. And people respond to them really well because they're, not to toot my own horn, but they're clever and funny. And so people enjoy reading them. So now what does this have to do with your question about how do you stay focused? The point is that I think it's easier to stay focused when we give ourselves permission to have some fun over here and talk
Mm.
about other things, right? So stay focused. Like I'm going to stay focused on my message about what kind of business offerings I have. Okay. And I'm going to write about storytelling and podcast guesting and brand building and how those things relate and how I can help you raise your authority, raise your visibility, be seen as the go-to person in your field for your audience. And then I'm going to talk about some other things that feed my soul, that make me happy, so that I'm not always just feeling like, oh, I've got to post about the same thing every day. I'm talking about my brand building. It's the, I'm talking about the Authentic Guest Academy again. Oh, you know what I mean? Because it can get old just doing that. And I think that if you know what your core business value is, what is the thing that makes your business unique, what is the thing that you do better than your competition, and you focus on that when
Mm.
you're focusing on talking business, but then you talk about some other things that show you to be a fuller, rounder human being, right? We all want to relate to each other as human beings. We all like doing business with people we know. If you are out there looking for a financial planner, maybe you have a financial planner and they're retiring, or maybe you don't have a financial planner and you decide you need one. Well, if like one of your kids' good friend's dad or mom that you see at school events and maybe you have a beer with occasionally, if they're a financial planner, you're probably just going to go directly to that person. You're not going to start shopping around for a financial planner. You're going to go to the person that you already know and that you already like. And you're probably going to trust. I mean, there's lots of psychological studies that have been done that show once you get to like somebody, you trust them implicitly, even if you don't have any like real reason to trust them, right? They've never proven to you that they're a good financial planner, but you've gotten to know this person, you've gotten to like this person, and you just that's the way that the mind works subconsciously. We then automatically trust those people. And so part of, you know, the idea of what I'm talking about is having some fun in painting a rounder picture of a fuller picture of yourself, is that in doing that, people feel that they get to know you a little better. They say, that's what he likes, sci-fi, he likes the Red Sox, he's into baseball, I like baseball, I like movies, I'm a Marvel guy too, I'm whatever, right? And now if they decide that they want to come to somebody because they're thinking about doing a podcast tour and really investing heavily into trying to like get on a lot of shows, and they think, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I should probably get some help around how to be a better guest. They're just going to come to me. They're not going to go
Right.
Googling, try to find 5 other coaches and compare me to them. And like, no, they're just going to come to me and say, okay, what's your program? Sounds good. Let's do it.
Oh, boy, I love that. Boy, I love that. That's so powerful. Speaking of podcasts, so I love that we kind of started with, okay, how do we get our voice and our brand? So many leaders are thinking more and more, boy, I'd love to be interviewed, and seems like podcasts aren't going away. So,
No.
speak to the leader who's been thinking, in the back of their head, boy, I've got something to add. Uh, how could that be a secret weapon for their business, their leadership? Taking that step out to try to become a guest on a podcast.
Um, yeah, to speak to the people that, um, yeah, I get asked this question all the time, and you'd think I'd have a great answer for it, but it's one of those things where it seems so obvious to me that sometimes I have a hard time explaining like, why should you do it? I'm like, why? Why are you even asking me? Don't we all understand why we should be doing this? But the reality is that like podcasting is such a good podcasting as well, but podcast guesting is such a great way to build your brand, build your authority, and I'll tell you, and it's not that hard to start doing, and I'll tell you kind of why you should be doing it, and how you should get started. And okay, why you should be doing it. You think about who seems more like believable. The person that comes on and says, I'm an expert, I know all about you know brand building, or the guy who has somebody else introduce him as an expert that knows all about brand building. I mean, if we use, at the risk of bursting my own bubble, sticking a pin in my own aura here, you've spent a long time building your audience here, and the people that are watching your show routinely, that are listening to your show routinely, see real value in your show. They see value in you as a host. They trust you as a host, and they trust that you're only bringing on people that are worth their time to listen to, right? Now, when you bring me on and you say that you're excited to talk to me, well, then I automatically get a piece of that trust that you've spent all
Mm.
this time building with your audience. And I just walked in the door. I've done nothing
Mm-hmm.
in terms of your audience to earn that trust, but I automatically get it because they trust in you that you're not bringing just any old guy on the show that's going to steer them wrong, right? So it's a huge time saver for the guest. They automatically, you think about it in another setting. I mean, if you show up to some conference and somebody steps on the stage as the keynote speaker, even if you don't know who that keynote speaker is, you're automatically going to be like, okay, well, I better listen to this person. They're the keynote speaker. They must be worth listening to, right? So you get this automatic inbuilt credibility now with an audience probably of hundreds of people, if not 1,000 or more people, depending on the size of the show that you're on. And realistically, those are probably all people that you've never spoken to.
Mm.
Like maybe in your audience, there's a few people that follow me on LinkedIn, maybe. But I'm right now maybe speaking to hundreds of people that I have never connected with before. And I'm speaking with them for like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, right? Like they're not a captive audience. They will leave, and audience members in a podcast, we both know, right? They do drop off over the podcast, but still, I mean, at the end of the show, there's still going to have been hundreds of people or whatever that have stuck with the show the whole time. Now, what would you like if somebody offered you an opportunity to get on stage and speak in front of 300 people? You would jump at that opportunity. I mean, 300 targeted people that you
Yeah.
knew were interested in the subject that you were going to go there and speak about. It's a no-brainer.
Yep.
And you can easily get yourself booked on one podcast a week and do like 50 podcasts a year. But what's the chances that you're going to get booked to speak on 50 stages a year? I mean, people who have good speaking careers do, but I mean, that's their career. That's not, they're running a business and they're speaking on 50 stages a year. So it's just such an incredible opportunity. Now, hopefully, if I've done a good job today and we get to the end and you're going to say, hey, Seth, how can people, connect with you? And then I'm going to tell them. And some segment of your audience is probably going to come and
Right.
follow me.
Right.
Right. And that's all. Those are all people that I would not normally have reached. I can keep killing it on LinkedIn, and slowly but surely my LinkedIn audience is going to grow over time as social media audiences do. But the hard thing about social media audiences is you start talking in an echo chamber, and all your first and second degree connections are always the ones that come and comment on your stuff and are always the one that you comment on. And
Yep.
you have to work really hard to get out of that into your third and your fourth degree and your fifth degree connections. And right now, I'm speaking to hundreds of third and fourth and fifth degree connections.
So good.
That's who we want to be speaking to, because chances are you've already sold to your first and second degree connections, or they're just people that are great people and you enjoy interacting with, but they're never going to be your clients, or they're not going to be your clients anytime soon. Right. So, podcasting is absolutely great for that reason. It's great for other reasons too. If you start podcast guesting on a regular basis, you are going to be forced, you're choosing to, right? So nobody's holding a gun to your head, but you're going to be forced to talk about what you do over and over and over again. And even for somebody that thinks that they have real clarity about what they do, who they serve, what their key messages are, you will actually learn a lot about yourself and your business in being a guest. Because, I'm going to come on a show, I'm going to get asked a question, and I'm going to say, okay, I always get asked that question. It's not my favorite question because I don't think it's really the answer is A, and I'm going to talk about that, but like, I'd really rather be talking about B. Right. Well, now, if I'm doing a good job as a guest, I'm actually going to use that question to pivot into B. So, I can do both. But the point is that sometimes I think that answer A is really not going to make the the audience all that excited. But then when I give that answer, the host lights up and says, "Oh my God, hey audience, were you paying attention? Because what he just said was really important." And then maybe in the comments of the show, people are like, "Oh, I loved it when you said A."
Yep.
Now, here I came in thinking that wasn't all that important to my audience for my business. Whoa, okay. Now, next time I get on a show, I'm going to make sure I talk about A.
Wow.
If I'm wondering what I'm going to write about on LinkedIn, I'm going to start creating some posts around A because that really resonated, right? And we learn this type of stuff all the time, because the flip side is true too. Sometimes I'm like, here comes the answer they're all going to go bananas for. And then it's kind of like, okay, next question.
Yep. Yep.
But through doing this over and over and over again, I learn more and more about the difference between what I know as an expert and what I think people want to hear and need to hear, and what people actually want and need to hear, right? Want and need to hear, not necessarily like, I know what they need to hear to get to learn and get better, but that's not always the thing that excites them to purchase, to buy, to want, right, to get into the program. And I can't help anybody until I've enticed them to actually engage with me. And what entices them to engage with me is not necessarily always the thing that's the most important lesson that they need to learn. And that can get very confusing as an expert in our own field. We're so close to what we do, and we have such a deep understanding of what we do, that sometimes we lose sight of what the audience who doesn't have that deep of an understanding really really needs to hear, really resonates with. Podcasting does a great job of helping with that.
Wow.
So
absolutely. This is mind blowing. Absolutely.
well, thanks. I appreciate that. So the third thing I promised was that, or that was two parts of the two answers to the first part. And the second part is how do you get started at it? There's a lot of great ways to get started at guesting on podcasts. It can be difficult for some people. It means putting yourself out there. It also depends on what kind of budget that you have to work with. I am a huge advocate of hiring a booking agency to book you on shows. I have a booking agency that books me on shows, booked me on this show. I also book myself on shows. So I'm not saying booking agency or nothing, but if it's within your budget to hire a booking agency, the big ones, the real legitimate ones that will get you on good shows like this one are, when it comes down to it, it probably costs me $550 to get booked on a show. It seems like a lot of money, but if I can find one person from this show that wants to hire me as a coach, I've way more than paid for the $550 that it cost me to come on this show. And then there's, and then I book myself on shows, and then there's no cost to that other than my time and effort. Right. And so, if you are serious about it, if you're like, I've done a few podcasts, I think it really would work for me, I really want to lean into this heavily, go find yourself a booking agent, take that hassle off your plate, let the professionals do it.
Yes.
If that's not going to be, if that's not realistic for you financially, or you're just like, well, I like to learn how to do it myself before I hire somebody to do it. There are a number of resources online, from Facebook groups, find a guest, be a guest Facebook groups, newsletters that people put out where they, have shows that are looking for guests because they're helping, they're like podcast coaches that help people stand their podcast up, not guest coaching, but the podcast coaching. And then they're always helping their people find guests for their shows. And then, one tip that I always give my clients is, look, go find a show that you think is reasonable for you to be on, and chase that show down. But then find the guests that you like from that show that you think are similar to you, and run iTunes and Spotify searches for those guests' names. Because then all the other shows that they've been on are going to pop up. And if like that show that they were on is the right, real good fit for you, likely the other shows that they've been on are also going to be a very good fit for you. And now you've got another dozen, probably per name or whatever, you pick 3 or 4 names. Now you've got 4 dozen new shows that you can potentially be pitching yourself for. And then it's just a matter of pitching yourself. You put together a one sheet, you've got your headshot, you've got a little brief bio about yourself, you've got your social media links, you've got, the 4 or 5 bullet point topics that you focus on, and 4 or 5 bullet point questions that would be like, so the host is like, okay, well, what we talk about? Oh, these questions. Okay. Make it really easy for the host to be able to decide, whether the host or the producer to decide, okay, yeah, this person, sounds right. And then fire off that pitch, but fire off that pitch with a little, take a look at the show, look at a few of the episodes. Who are they talking to? What kind of subjects are they talking about? And you don't have to take hours doing it, but craft yourself an email to that host that speaks to why you would be a good fit for the show. Okay, I help people become better podcast guests. I see that you had somebody in the last 3 months speaking about that. I listened to the episode. I was blown away by what your guest said about X and about Y. And I would love to talk about that further because it was a really exciting conversation. But you never got to talk about Z, and Z is a really important part of this. And I think that your show would benefit from me coming on and talking about Z, right? And so now now the host is going to, maybe they say no, maybe they say yes, but you're not just throwing a pitch at them and making them do all the work. You're showing that you understand their show, and you're actually telling them how you are going to bring specific value to their show rather than generic value of, I'm a financial consultant and I think that your audience would, like your audience are all business owners and need accountants, and I'm an accountant, so that it would be a good match. I mean, sometimes that'll get you a booking, but it probably won't get you a booking on the better shows.
Right.
So,
Wow, that's so good. And what I love that you did is you've wrapped in storytelling a few times, and it really feels like if you're going to get to be on a podcast, going to be a guest, you want to be as magnetic, provide as much resource as possible, and use those stories because people use stories so well. So maybe let's wrap the conversation with just, some hints or some reminders or some ways that we can wrap story into when we do have that chance to be a podcast guest.
yeah, using story is really powerful. I mean, I started out this episode with a story, right, about Keith and I going down to the highway and
Yep.
listening to the air horns, getting the truckers to blow their air horns. Now, I have a million stories, million, that's an exaggeration, obviously, but I have a ton of stories like that, little bits from my life about, if we have the time, I'll tell another super quick story. Normally, I don't advise people to tell a story by announcing that they're telling a story, but for these purposes, when I was, I mentioned it earlier that I had I started a newspaper, and before I started that newspaper, I was about to fail out of my second college. And I've suffered from anxiety and depression my entire adult life. I was self-medicating. I was missing a ton of, classes. I wasn't turning in papers on time. And, I was about to fail out of college. So I finally, for the first time in my life, went and got help, went to a therapist. And once we worked through basic things and got me on track, one of the things that she would actually doing, she was acting as kind of half therapist, half like academic advisor or something. And she'd say, okay, Seth, did you go talk to Professor so-and-so about an extension on that paper? Did you go talk to Professor, somebody about some extra credit work that you could do to help you get back on track? And I would go to these professors. I would say, okay, no, I haven't, but okay, I will go do that. And I would go to speak to these professors 100% convinced that they were just going to laugh in my face and say, hey, kid, you're not, this isn't junior high or high school. You're a college student now. You're expected to be able to show up to class and turn in papers on time. And the only way that I could do it was through the mental trick of saying, when these people literally laugh in my face, they're not laughing at me, they're laughing at her because this stupid idea was her idea. And lo and behold, they wouldn't laugh in my face. They'd give me the extension. They would give me the extra credit work because they wanted me to get back on track, right? But what that taught me was that, it was my insecurities and my hangups that was holding me back from going and getting the help that I needed. And that eventually I didn't need her as the crutch to help me go and do the things that I needed to do. I actually built an alter ego for myself that I could put on when I would go and have these conversations that were uncomfortable for me. And one of the things that I teach people in my programs is, if you're having a hard time with stage fright, camera shy, you're having a hard time with imposter syndrome, whatever, that an alter ego can be very helpful in being your authentic self. All right, because you don't put on an alter ego that's radically different from yourself. You build yourself an alter ego that is made up of the components of the best parts of yourself, so that you're your best self, or you're your best self for that particular instance that you have a need for getting on stage and giving a keynote, for getting on a podcast or anything, right? So now, what does that got to do with the question that you asked about telling stories? The point is that we all have these stories in our life, and they don't have to be a big story about like almost failing out of college. I have a story that I tell about giving my daughter a gift of a cookbook that was the author is an award-winning illustrator, and the cookbook is illustrated. There's no photos in the cookbook. It's all this author's illustration. And all my daughter wants to be in life is a professional illustrator. She went absolutely berserk for this cookbook. She brought it to school, showed it to all her girlfriends, ended up asking me to buy extra copies with her allowance money so she could give them to friends at school that loved them, right? I have stories about interactions that I've had with people at the grocery store. I have stories, a zillion stories that are all just little segments of an everyday life that relate to my business in some way. The story about my daughter, it relates in that, I use that to teach people that they need to be true to their voice, because if the illustrator lady had made a cookbook with photos and like a normal, just everyday, ordinary cookbook, my daughter wouldn't have gone crazy for it the way that she did. But because the woman stuck to her, to what makes her special, stuck to that illustration, right? Her skills as an illustrator, her cookbook has been a success, at least with some segment of the market. And, every little story in your life, not every story in your life is going to relate to your business, but plenty of stories in your life are going to relate to your business. So what I would recommend people do is keep a story journal, where when you come home at night and you feel that you want to tell your spouse or your roommate, or jump on the phone and call your best friend or your parents or something, and tell them some story of something that happened to you in the day. Even if it didn't happen to you, if it was something that you saw, like, oh my God, you won't believe what I saw when I was on my lunch break. Jot that down in your story journal. You don't have to write it out. It's not a full story. You write like 2 or 3 or 4 sentences that just give you the bare bones of what happened. And day after day, just collect those in a journal. And then the next step is you put them into a spreadsheet and you number them. And then you make a list of all the things you would like to talk about on Instagram, on LinkedIn, whatever, and in your newsletter, on your website, your blog, whatever. You come up with all the things that you want to talk about. And then get a random number generator, pick one randomly from column A and pick one randomly from column B, and try to make the story idea from column A match the like business point that you're trying to make. Most of the time, they're not going to fit very well together, and so you're going to have to, you're going to have to force it. And in forcing it, for me, it's kind of fun that they end up funny because you have to make it weird to make them fit, and the weird stories are funny. But oftentimes you'll find that as you practice this, as you begin to flex and exercise this mental muscle, you get really good. And suddenly these stories that you didn't initially see any business like value in whatsoever, suddenly you see a story and you're like, wait a minute, that could relate to not just this topic, it could relate to that topic and a third topic as well. And where this becomes really useful is that these types of stories are super relatable.
Mm.
And something we don't hear, I think, often enough. People talk about authenticity in your brand. I think that we need to be talking more about relatability in our brand as well, because as we were talking about earlier in the show, people want to do business with people. People do business with the people that they trust, and people trust people that they can relate to.
Oof.
So if you start telling some story about picking your kids up from dance class or something, then other people are like, yep, I picked my kids up from dance class too. Oh, that very type of thing that you're talking about has absolutely happened to me. I like you. I want to do business with you because you seem to be the type of person that I am. You probably are a person that I would like to do business with, right? I mean, you think about a bartender. Particularly in big cities, you have bartenders, right? That sometimes they'll leave one bar and go to another bar, and the clientele will maybe not stop going to the first place, but they go to the second place specifically for that bartender.
Yep.
Is it because that bartender pours beer better than any other bartender or mixes a drink better than any bartender? No, it's because that bartender is a person that they've gotten to really know and like, and they enjoy that business interaction, right? I mean, a bartender, they're selling you a drink for money, right? But they make that interaction a pleasant interaction to have. And for many of us in our businesses, that's important, right? Like you you don't necessarily think about your tax accountant as somebody that you want to hang out and do business with, but if you have to hang out with your tax accountant to a certain degree. So why not have your tax accountant be somebody that you actually enjoy hanging out with, right? Like that's actually going to make a difference in whether somebody decides to hire accountant A versus accountant B.
Wow.
And so the more we can make our brand relatable, the better we're going to do as business leaders. And one of the biggest key, the key way to make your brand relatable is to mine those little everyday stories in our lives that are already super relatable and use that to, you know, to let people get to know us, but at the same time, teach that we understand our subject and what we're talking about. Right. I
Wow.
mean, I started things out with that truck driver, not
Yep.
truck driver, but that truck story. Right. And
Yep.
it's like, I could have told that, I could have explained that you have to be focused on a certain group of people and ignore another group of people in lots of different ways. But that's a fun, relatable way to tell the story. And whenever I tell that story, invariably people are like, yeah, I used to do that exact same thing. Or my brothers did. Or it wasn't trucks for us, but it was some other thing. People immediately connect with that type of story.
Wow. Wow. I love this. This will be so incredibly helpful for our listeners. And I just appreciate you opening up the vaults. I filled a page of notes and I can't wait to dive more into this. Hey, before I let you go, let me ask you some rapid fire questions. Listeners, we're building an online communicators library, speakingpeople.com/skills library, where we're filling it with our guests' best recommendations and resources. So, do you have a favorite speaker? Every time you hear them, you just step away going, oh my goodness, they just checked all the boxes. I got to tell somebody about them.
Well, I do, but I couldn't tell you his name because I have a horrible, I can't remember names to save my life. If I wasn't married to her, I probably couldn't remember my wife's name. Um, Look, I'll send it to you and you can put it in the show notes. He is a speaking coach, so one would imagine that he's good. He's just amazing. I think that he's so incredibly good at his craft. Whatever he's speaking about, it's just engrossing to sit there and listen to him,
Yes.
watch him. His energy is so amazing. And again, I'm embarrassed that I don't know his name, but 53 years old, I've come to, I've accepted it about myself. I just can't do names.
No, no, no worries. If you're a podcast listener, not everyone is, but if you are, is there a guilty pleasure or a development one where you're like, ooh, yeah, highly recommend. You got to check this one out.
Um, yeah, a guilty pleasure. I mean, I'm a big nerd, so my guilty pleasures are often odd, but hardcore history
Mm.
with, I think the guy's name is Dan Carlin, something like that. Um, if you're into history and particularly kind of like geopolitical, military type, not everything's about like a major battle, but he tends to talk about like the rise and falls of empires and civilizations, or like, you know, we'll do a big multi-part series on like World War II or something like that.
Hmm.
The whole thing, start to finish. And he puts out very few episodes because each one of his episodes is like 3 or 4 hours long. So he comes out with one every like 3 months or something like that. And so you can, if you've got like yard work to do or something like that, you can put on one of these things and, an hour and a half later, you're still deep in a really interesting, if you're like me and you're into that type of thing, a really interesting discussion about, you know, the rise and fall of the Persian Empire, or something like that, or the
Oh,
conflict between Persia and Egypt, or something that you may never have even particularly known about, other than, I know there was a Persia and I know there was an Egypt, but I didn't know they had a big conflict
yep.
or something like that.
Oh,
I'm making that up. They may not have had a conflict, but
no, I love it. I love
that
it.
type of thing. Yeah, it's
And then,
fun.
and then lastly, is there a book you're running into somebody, they're about to go to a desert island and you're like, you got to take this book. It is the book that you recommend.
Oh, I read so much. This is hard for me. I hate doing this because then it's like, nah, I want to answer 10 of them. Um, uh, there's a book called Ancillary Justice.
Mm.
It won all three of the biggest sci-fi awards: the Hugo, the Nebula, and the Arthur C. Clarke. It was the first book ever to do it. Um, and it's only like 10 years old or something like that. It's not an ancient book. I It's the first in a three part in a trilogy. The first one stands alone. You don't have to go into the second and third book. It's amazing. In what I found, particularly in for me, what made it really interesting was that um, the protagonist is essentially the protagonist is it's hard to describe, but the protagonist is basically like an AI in a biological body, and lives in a civilization, a galactic civilization, whose language doesn't have gendered pronouns. And so, as the whole book goes on, the protagonist is continually misgendering people in such a way that as a reader, you have no idea who's a man in the story, who's a woman in the story, because the protagonist doesn't understand who's a woman or who's a man, because that's not how its mind works, right? And for me, it's an incredibly interesting story. The plot is great. It's really, that part of it is really good too. But as a reader, it was really interesting to grapple with that and find myself constantly trying to figure out, like, was that a man or is that a woman? When for the purpose of the story, it didn't matter at all whether that particular character was a man or that particular character was a woman. But it was important apparently for my mind, because I kept like struggling with it, which I thought was just an interesting like mirror up to myself. And it's like, okay, well, why does this matter to me? Like, why am I getting so hung up on the person's gender? Like, it doesn't, they're a soldier. It doesn't matter whether they're a man soldier or a woman soldier. There's that, you know. So that for me, it was fun, but it wasn't. There wasn't, you know, it wasn't hitting you over the head with like gender politics or something like that. It was
Sure.
just kind of a really interesting way to look at the world through this character who sees it differently than I do. So,
I love it. Okay. Well,
Ancillary Justice, really good book.
I love it. I will put that in there. Where is the best place we can send our listeners to find everything about you and get more information about your products and services and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, I live on LinkedIn, so come
Okay.
find me on LinkedIn and follow me. If you, you know, if you're really interested in leaning heavily into podcast guesting, if you have been doing some shows and you want to do some more, you've been thinking about going on a, you know, what I call a podcast tour. Um, I've got a new cohort of my active guest accelerator launching very soon. And if you're interested in learning more about that, just go to reachseth.com and you can book an opportunity to speak with me. I can tell you a little bit more about it and see if you would be a good fit for that.
Amazing. Amazing. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, and I just appreciate your time, and I cannot wait for our listeners to get to know you as well. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. I really enjoyed being on the show, and you know, I wish it was longer. We'll have to do it again sometime. You know, 6 months from now, let's do it again.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Speak with People podcast. It means the world to us when you share this episode. Thanks for liking, subscribing, or following the podcast. That really does help the podcast get into more ears and into more leaders listening. Also, don't forget, we have 2 exciting resources for you. The first is go to Facebook and join the Speakers Group. This is a community designed for leaders who want to grow their communication skills. Also, go to speakwithpeople.com/skills library to access the Communication Skills Library. It is an online resource chock filled with resources that will inspire you and transform you and grow your communication skills. Thanks again for being a part of the listening community. We cannot wait for the next episode.